Marcus Williams woke up at 5 in the morning like he did every day. His small apartment was quiet and dark. He lived alone in a tiny place on the bad side of town. The walls were thin and he could hear his neighbors fighting next door. But Marcus did not mind. He was used to noise. He was used to being ignored. He got dressed in his blue work uniform. The shirt had his name written on a small patch. The pants were old and had been washed so many times they were soft like cotton. He put on his black work boots. They were heavy and made noise when he walked, but they kept his feet safe when he cleaned. Marcus ate a simple breakfast. 2 pieces of toast with butter, a cup of black coffee. He could not afford much food. His job as a janitor did not pay very well, but it was enough to pay rent and buy what he needed. He had been doing this work for 3 years now. At 6:30, Marcus walked to the bus stop. The morning air was cold and he pulled his jacket tight around him. Other people waited at the bus stop too. They were dressed in nice clothes going to office jobs. They did not look at Marcus. They never looked at him. It was like he was not there at all. The bus came and Marcus got on. He sat in the back like always. He watched the city wake up through the dirty window. People hurried down the sidewalks with coffee cups and phones pressed to their ears. Cars filled the streets. Everyone seemed to have somewhere important to go. Everyone except Marcus. The bus stopped in front of a big building made of white stone. Gold letters on the front said Meridian Conservatory of Music. This was where Marcus worked. This was where the rich kids came to learn music. This was where he spent his days being invisible. Marcus got off the bus and walked to the back door of the building. He used his key card to get inside. The hallways were empty and quiet. Soon they would be filled with students carrying expensive instruments, violins and flutes and cellos that cost more money than Marcus made in a year. He went to the cleaning closet and got his cart. The cart had wheels that squeaked when he pushed it. It held all his supplies: mops and brooms and bottles of cleaning spray, paper towels and trash bags, everything he needed to make the building clean and perfect for the students and teachers. Marcus started his work in the main hallway. The floor was made of smooth white marble that showed every footprint and speck of dust. He mopped it carefully until it shined like a mirror. The walls were covered with pictures of famous musicians. Dead composers and old paintings looked down at him with serious faces. As he worked, students began to arrive. They were young and dressed in expensive clothes. They carried leather bags and instrument cases. They talked loudly about their lessons and their performances. They walked past Marcus like he was not there, like he was just part of the building. Marcus had learned to be invisible. When he cleaned near them, he moved quietly. He did not make eye contact. He did not speak unless someone asked him a question. And that almost never happened. In 3 years of working here, most of the students had never said a single word to him. Sometimes Marcus heard them practicing their music. The sounds came from the classrooms and practice rooms, piano melodies and violin solos. Some of the students were very good. Others were still learning. But all of them had something Marcus did not have anymore. They had dreams. They had hope. They had a future in music. Marcus pushed his cart down another hallway. This one had practice rooms on both sides, small rooms with pianos where students came to work on their music. Through the glass doors he could see young people playing. Their faces were serious as they focused on the notes. Some looked frustrated when they made mistakes. Others smiled when they played something beautiful. In one room, a girl with long blonde hair played a sad song on the piano. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys. She played the same part over and over, trying to get it right. Marcus stopped for a moment to listen. The music was beautiful but incomplete. The girl was missing something. She had the technique but not the feeling. Marcus knew about feeling in music. He knew about putting your heart into every note. But that was a long time ago. That was before life taught him that dreams were for other people. Now he was just a janitor. Now he was invisible. A teacher walked by carrying a stack of music sheets. She was an older woman with gray hair and glasses. She wore a black dress and expensive shoes that clicked on the marble floor. She did not look at Marcus. She walked past him like he was not there. Marcus continued his work. He emptied trash cans and wiped down surfaces. He cleaned windows until they were clear and bright. He worked slowly and carefully. He took pride in his work even if no one noticed. By noon, the building was busy with activity. Students hurried between classes. Teachers gave lessons behind closed doors. The sounds of music filled the air. Pianos and violins and voices singing scales. It was like a symphony of learning and dreams. Marcus ate his lunch alone in the basement. He brought a sandwich from home and ate it quickly. He did not have many friends. The other janitors worked different shifts. The students and teachers did not talk to him. He was used to being alone. After lunch, Marcus went back to work. He cleaned the big concert hall where students gave performances. The room had hundreds of red velvet seats and a stage with a beautiful black piano. The piano was the most expensive thing in the building. Students lined up to practice on it. Marcus cleaned around the piano carefully. He dusted its shiny surface and polished the keys until they gleamed. He had cleaned this piano hundreds of times, but he had never touched the keys. He was not allowed to play it. He was just there to clean it. As the day ended, students began to leave. They packed up their instruments and said goodbye to their friends. They talked about weekend plans and upcoming concerts. Their voices echoed in the hallways as they left the building. Soon the building was quiet again. Marcus finished his work and put away his supplies. He locked the cleaning closet and walked to the back door. Another day was over. Another day of being invisible was done. Marcus waited at the bus stop in the growing darkness. The streetlights came on one by one. He thought about going home to his empty apartment. He thought about watching television and going to bed early. He thought about doing the same thing tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. But deep inside, in a place he tried to keep locked away, Marcus thought about music. He thought about the piano in the concert hall. He thought about the girl with blonde hair who played with technique but no feeling. He thought about what it would be like to touch those keys again, to make music again, to feel alive again. The bus came and Marcus got on. He sat in the back and watched the city lights pass by the window. Tomorrow would be another day of being invisible. Another day of cleaning and being ignored. Another day of pretending that music was not still living somewhere deep in his heart. Marcus did not know that everything was about to change. He did not know that soon the whole world would see him. He did not know that his music was still there, waiting for the right moment to come alive again. Marcus was not always a janitor. 25 years ago, he was a different person with a different life. He was 18 years old and full of dreams. He had talent that made people stop and listen. He had a future that seemed bright and full of promise. When Marcus was young, his mother worked 2 jobs to support them. His father had left when Marcus was only 5 years old. It was just Marcus and his mother in a small house on the south side of the city. Money was always tight, but his mother made sure Marcus had what he needed. The house had an old piano in the living room. It was brown and scratched, and some of the keys stuck when you pressed them, but it made music, and that was all Marcus cared about. His mother had bought it from a church that was closing down. She paid $20 for it, which was a lot of money for them back then. Marcus taught himself to play on that old piano. He did not have money for lessons, so he learned by listening to music on the radio. He would hear a song and then try to play it by ear. At first, he could only play simple melodies with one hand. But slowly he got better. Soon he was playing with both hands. Then he was making up his own songs. His mother would sit in the kitchen and listen while she cooked dinner. Sometimes she would stop what she was doing and come to the living room to watch him play. She would smile and clap when he finished a song. "You have a gift," she would tell him. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." When Marcus was in high school, his music teacher heard him play. Mrs. Rodriguez was amazed by his talent. She had never heard a student play like Marcus. He could play classical music and jazz and blues. He could make the piano sound like it was singing or crying or laughing. Mrs. Rodriguez started giving Marcus free lessons after school. She taught him about music theory and proper technique. She showed him how to read sheet music and play complex pieces. Marcus learned fast because he loved music more than anything in the world. During his senior year, Mrs. Rodriguez helped Marcus apply to music schools. She believed he could get a scholarship because of his talent. They sent recordings of Marcus playing to colleges all over the country. They sent applications and letters and hoped for the best. The letter from Juilliard came in the spring. Marcus was accepted with a full scholarship. Juilliard was the best music school in America. Only the most talented students got in. Marcus could hardly believe it was real. His mother cried tears of joy when she read the letter. "My baby is going to be a famous musician," she said, holding him tight. "I always knew this day would come." Marcus spent that summer practicing for college. He learned new pieces and perfected his technique. He dreamed about studying with the best teachers in the world. He imagined himself performing in concert halls and recording albums. The future seemed perfect and bright. In the fall, Marcus moved to New York City to start school at Juilliard. The city was big and loud and expensive. The school was filled with talented students from all over the world. Everyone was the best player from their hometown. Everyone had big dreams and high hopes. Marcus worked hard in his classes. He practiced for hours every day. His teachers were impressed with his natural talent and his dedication. He made friends with other music students who shared his passion. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he belonged somewhere. But in his second year, everything changed. Marcus got a phone call from home that turned his world upside down. His mother was sick. Very sick. The doctor said she had cancer and needed treatment right away. The medical bills would be huge. The insurance would not cover everything. Marcus tried to stay in school and help his mother at the same time. He got a part-time job washing dishes at a restaurant near campus. He sent every dollar he could back home. But it was not enough. The bills kept coming and they kept getting bigger. His mother did not want Marcus to leave school. "Don't give up your dreams for me," she said over the phone. Her voice was weak but determined. "I'll be fine. You stay there and become the musician you're meant to be." But Marcus could not focus on his music while his mother was suffering. He could not play beautiful songs while she was fighting for her life. He made the hardest decision of his life. He dropped out of Juilliard and moved back home to take care of his mother. Marcus got a job at a factory that made car parts. The work was hard and the hours were long, but it paid better than most jobs he could get without a college degree. He worked the night shift so he could take his mother to doctor appointments during the day. The treatment was brutal. Marcus watched his strong, proud mother become weak and frail. She lost her hair from the chemotherapy. She lost weight and could barely eat. Some days she was too sick to get out of bed, but she never complained. She never gave up hope. Marcus sold the old piano to help pay for medicine. It broke his heart to see strangers carry it out of the house. That piano had been his friend and teacher for so many years. Now it was gone, just like his dreams of being a musician. For 2 years, Marcus worked and took care of his mother. Slowly, the treatments began to work. The cancer went into remission. His mother got stronger and was able to work again. The doctors said she would be okay as long as she took care of herself. But the damage was done. Marcus was 22 years old and had been away from music for 2 years. He had no money saved and no way to go back to school. Juilliard had given his scholarship to someone else. The music world had moved on without him. Marcus tried to keep playing music, but it was different now. The joy was gone. Every time he sat at a piano, he thought about what could have been. He thought about the career he had given up. The music that used to heal his soul now only reminded him of his lost dreams. Over the years, Marcus worked different jobs. He was a security guard at a mall. He worked construction during the summer. He drove a delivery truck. He did whatever he could to pay the bills and help his mother when she needed it. Music became a painful memory. Marcus stopped playing altogether. He avoided places where there might be pianos. When he heard music on the radio, he changed the station. It hurt too much to remember what he used to love. His mother worried about him. She could see the sadness in his eyes. She knew he blamed himself for giving up his dreams. She tried to talk to him about music, but Marcus would always change the subject. "It's in the past," he would say. "I'm fine with my life now." But he was not fine. He was empty inside. He went through the motions of living, but he was not really alive. He worked and paid bills and watched television. He had friends, but no real connections. He dated sometimes, but never found love. Something important was missing from his life. When Marcus was 42, he saw a job posting for a janitor at the Meridian Conservatory of Music. The pay was decent and the benefits were good. He needed a steady job and the hours worked with his schedule. He applied without thinking about what it would mean to be around music again. On his first day of work, Marcus walked through the halls of the conservatory and heard students practicing. The sound of pianos and violins filled the air. For a moment, he felt something stir in his chest. Something he had buried years ago tried to wake up. But Marcus pushed the feeling down. He was just there to work. He was not a musician anymore. He was a janitor, and that was all he would ever be. He told himself that music was for other people now, young people with talent and opportunity and hope. For 3 years, Marcus cleaned around the music but never let it touch his heart. He watched students practice and perform, but he felt disconnected from their world. He was invisible to them, and that was how he liked it. Being seen meant being judged. Being judged meant remembering who he used to be. But late at night, when the building was empty and quiet, Marcus would sometimes stop his work and listen to the silence. In that silence, he could almost hear the music he used to make. He could almost remember what it felt like to lose himself in a beautiful song. Marcus did not know that those memories were about to become real again. He did not know that the music inside him was not dead, just sleeping. He did not know that sometimes the best dreams are the ones that come true when you least expect them. All he knew was that he was tired of being invisible. He was tired of cleaning around other people's dreams. He was tired of pretending that music did not matter to him anymore. Deep down, Marcus was ready for something to change. He was ready to remember who he used to be. It was a Thursday night in October when everything changed for Marcus. The building was supposed to be empty by 9 o'clock, but one student had stayed late to practice. Marcus could hear the piano from the main concert hall as he cleaned the nearby classrooms. The student was playing the same piece over and over. It was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written. Marcus knew it well. He had learned to play it years ago when he was at Juilliard. Back then, it was his favorite piece to perform. Marcus tried not to listen, but the music filled the hallways. The student was technically skilled, but something was missing. The notes were correct, but there was no soul in the playing. It sounded mechanical, like a computer playing music instead of a human being sharing their heart. Marcus finished cleaning the classroom and moved his cart toward the concert hall. Through the open doors, he could see a young man with dark hair sitting at the grand piano. The student looked frustrated. He kept stopping in the middle of the piece and starting over again. The young man's name was Trevor Ashford. Marcus had seen him many times before. Trevor came from a wealthy family and drove an expensive car to school. He wore designer clothes and carried a leather bag that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Trevor was the kind of student who expected everything to come easily to him. But music does not care about money or family name. Music only cares about truth and feeling and dedication. Trevor had money and education, but he did not have the one thing that mattered most. He did not have heart. Marcus watched from the doorway as Trevor played. The young man's technique was impressive. His fingers moved quickly over the keys and he hit every note correctly. But the music sounded empty. It had no emotion, no story, no life. Trevor stopped playing and slammed his hands down on the keys in frustration. "This is impossible," he said to the empty room. "I'll never get this right in time for the competition." Marcus knew about the competition. It was the most important event of the year at the conservatory. Students competed for the chance to perform with the City Symphony Orchestra. The winner would get a full scholarship and a chance to start a professional career. Trevor wanted to win very badly. Trevor gathered his sheet music and stuffed it into his expensive bag. He stood up from the piano bench and looked around the room with anger. "Stupid piece," he muttered. Rachmaninoff was showing off when he wrote this. Marcus felt something twist in his stomach when he heard those words. Rachmaninoff was not showing off. He was sharing his deepest feelings through music. The concerto was about love and loss and hope. It was about the human experience put into sound. Trevor did not understand that, and that was why his playing sounded so hollow. Trevor walked toward the exit, but he did not see Marcus standing in the shadows by the door. As he passed, he dropped some of his sheet music. The pages scattered across the floor, but Trevor did not notice. He was too busy complaining on his phone to someone about how hard the piece was. Marcus waited until Trevor was gone before he entered the concert hall. The room was huge and elegant, with red velvet seats and gold decorations on the walls. The stage was lit by soft lights that made the black piano look like a jewel. Marcus picked up the scattered sheet music. The pages were covered with notes and markings where Trevor had written instructions to himself. "Faster here," one note said. "Louder there," said another. But there were no notes about feeling or emotion or what the music meant. Marcus looked at the music in his hands and felt something stir inside him. He had not seen these pages in 25 years, but he remembered every note. He remembered learning this piece when he was young and full of dreams. He remembered how it felt to play it with his whole heart. The concert hall was empty and quiet. The security guard would not make his rounds for another hour. Marcus was completely alone with the piano and the music he had loved so much. He walked slowly toward the stage. Each step felt heavy, like he was walking through deep water. He had not played piano in years. He had avoided it for so long that he was not sure he even remembered how. But his feet kept moving toward the beautiful instrument. Marcus climbed the steps to the stage. The piano seemed bigger up close, more impressive and intimidating. The keys were perfectly clean and shiny. The wood was polished until it gleamed like a mirror. This piano cost more money than Marcus would make in 10 years. He set the sheet music on the piano's music stand. His hands were shaking as he pulled out the bench and sat down. The bench was the perfect height and cushioned with soft leather. Everything about this piano was perfect and expensive and meant for people much more important than a janitor. Marcus placed his hands on his knees and stared at the keys, 88 black and white keys that could make any sound imaginable. He had not touched piano keys in so many years. What if he had forgotten how? What if the music was gone forever? Slowly, carefully, Marcus lifted his right hand and placed it on the keys. The keys felt cool and smooth under his fingers. He pressed middle C very softly, and the note rang out pure and clear in the empty hall. The sound was beautiful and rich and full of possibilities. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to remember. He thought back to when he was 18 and learning this piece for the first time. He remembered his teacher at Juilliard showing him how to bring out the melody. He remembered practicing for hours until his fingers ached. He remembered the joy he felt when he finally played it correctly. The muscle memory was still there. His fingers found their positions on the keys like they had never been away. Marcus began to play very softly, just the opening melody of the concerto. The notes came slowly at first, hesitant and uncertain. But as he played, something magical happened. The music began to flow more naturally. His fingers remembered where to go and how to move. The beautiful melody filled the empty concert hall like water filling a dry riverbed. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his hands moving over the keys. It was like watching someone else play. His fingers knew what to do even though his mind could hardly believe it was happening. The music was still there inside him, waiting all these years for the chance to come alive again. He played the opening section twice, getting more confident each time. The sound was fuller now, richer and more expressive. Marcus began to add dynamics, making some parts soft and gentle, others strong and powerful. The piano responded to every touch, every emotion he put into the music. For the first time in 25 years, Marcus felt truly alive. The music flowed through him like electricity, waking up parts of his soul that had been sleeping for so long. This was who he really was, not a janitor, not an invisible man, but a musician, someone who could take notes on a page and turn them into pure emotion. Marcus played for 30 minutes, working through different sections of the concerto. Some parts came back to him easily. Others took more time to remember. But with each note, he felt more like himself. The young man with dreams and talent was still there inside the middle-aged janitor. When he finally stopped playing, the silence in the hall seemed different. It was not empty anymore. It was full of the music that had just filled the space. Marcus sat at the piano bench, breathing hard like he had just run a race. His heart was pounding with excitement and fear and joy. Marcus looked around the empty concert hall and realized what he had done. He had broken the rules. He was not supposed to touch the piano. If anyone found out, he would lose his job. But for the first time in years, he did not care about being safe. He cared about being alive. He gathered up Trevor's sheet music and put it back where the young man had dropped it. He made sure everything looked exactly like it had before. Then he walked off the stage and back to his cleaning cart. But something had changed inside Marcus. The music was awake now, and it would not go back to sleep. As he finished his work that night, he hummed the melody from the concerto. His step was lighter and his heart felt full. Marcus did not know that the security cameras had recorded everything. He did not know that someone would find the footage and his secret would be revealed. He did not know that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. All he knew was that for 30 minutes he had remembered who he really was. And that was enough to change everything. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell arrived at the conservatory early on Friday morning. She was the director of the school and had been for 15 years. She was a tall, thin woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore expensive suits and walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Dr. Hartwell came from old money. Her family had donated millions of dollars to build the conservatory. Her name was on a plaque in the main lobby. She believed that music was for people like her, educated, wealthy, and refined. She had very strong opinions about who belonged in her school and who did not. Dr. Hartwell went to her office on the third floor and turned on her computer. She had a routine of checking the security footage from the night before. Usually nothing interesting happened after hours. Sometimes a student stayed late to practice. Occasionally, someone forgot to turn off a light. But Thursday night was different. Dr. Hartwell clicked on the video from the main concert hall. At first, everything looked normal. She saw Trevor Ashford practicing at the grand piano. She fast-forwarded through most of his session, noting that his playing still needed work. Trevor's father was a major donor to the school, so Dr. Hartwell made sure to keep track of his progress. Then she saw Trevor leave the hall in frustration. The camera showed him dropping sheet music on the floor and walking out without picking it up. Dr. Hartwell shook her head. These young people had no respect for anything. What happened next made Dr. Hartwell sit up straight in her chair. A man in a janitor's uniform entered the concert hall. It was Marcus Williams, the night custodian. Dr. Hartwell watched as he picked up the fallen sheet music. Good, she thought. At least someone around here has some sense. But then Marcus did something that made Dr. Hartwell's mouth fall open. He walked onto the stage. He sat down at the concert grand piano. And he began to play. Dr. Hartwell turned up the volume on her computer. The audio was clear and she could hear every note. What she heard made her blood boil. The janitor was playing Rachmaninoff and he was playing it beautifully. Better than most of her students could play it. Better than Trevor had played it just minutes before. How dare he? Dr. Hartwell said out loud to her empty office. How dare he touch that piano? She watched the entire 30-minute performance, getting angrier with each passing minute. The janitor had no right to play that piano. It was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and was meant only for serious musicians, not for the hired help. Dr. Hartwell was also shocked by how well Marcus played. She had never heard such beautiful, emotional playing from someone who was not a professional musician. Where had he learned to play like that? And why was he working as a janitor if he had such talent? But Dr. Hartwell did not think about those questions for long. She was too focused on the fact that Marcus had broken the rules. He had overstepped his boundaries. He had forgotten his place, and that was something she could not allow. Dr. Hartwell saved the video file to her computer. Then she called her assistant Margaret into her office. Margaret had worked for Dr. Hartwell for 10 years and knew how to handle her boss's moods. Margaret, I need you to see something, Dr. Hartwell said, her voice tight with anger. You won't believe what the night janitor did. Margaret watched the video with growing surprise. Like Dr. Hartwell, she was shocked by Marcus's talent. But unlike her boss, Margaret felt impressed rather than angry. He's really quite good, Margaret said carefully. Where do you think he learned to play like that? I don't care where he learned, Dr. Hartwell snapped. What matters is that he had no right to touch that piano. These people need to learn their place. Margaret had worked for wealthy families her whole life. She recognized the tone in Dr. Hartwell's voice. It was the same tone she used when talking about anyone she considered beneath her social status. Dr. Hartwell spent the morning showing the video to other faculty members. She called it a security breach and a violation of trust. But really, she wanted to share her outrage with people who would understand her point of view. Professor James Morrison was the head of the piano department. He was an older man who had studied at the finest music schools in Europe. When Dr. Hartwell showed him the video, his reaction surprised her. My goodness, Professor Morrison said, adjusting his glasses. This man has extraordinary talent. Listen to his phrasing, his dynamics. He understands this piece on a level that most of my students never reach. That's not the point, Dr. Hartwell said sharply. The point is that he violated the rules. We can't have the staff thinking they can use our instruments whenever they please. Professor Morrison watched the video again. Elizabeth, have you considered that this man might have formal training? Perhaps he studied music before he came to work here. We should find out more about his background. But Dr. Hartwell was not interested in Marcus's background. She was only interested in making sure he knew his place. She called Dr. Patricia Vance, who taught music history. Dr. Vance was known for her strict attitudes and her belief that classical music should only be performed by people with proper credentials. This is outrageous, Dr. Vance said after watching the video. We spent thousands of dollars maintaining these instruments. They're not toys for the custodial staff to play with. Dr. Hartwell felt better hearing Dr. Vance's reaction. This was the kind of support she needed. She forwarded the video to several other faculty members, along with a stern message about maintaining professional boundaries. By lunchtime, the video had been shared with most of the teaching staff. Some, like Professor Morrison, were impressed by Marcus's talent and curious about his story. Others, like Dr. Vance, were offended by what they saw as unprofessional behavior. But it was not just the faculty who saw the video. Dr. Hartwell also shared it with some of the school's major donors during a lunch meeting. She presented it as an example of why the school needed better security and stricter rules for staff. "You simply can't trust these people," she told the wealthy donors. "Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. Next thing you know, the janitor will think he can conduct the orchestra." The donors laughed at Dr. Hartwell's joke. They saw the video as an amusing story to share at dinner parties. "Can you believe it?" they would say. "The janitor at the conservatory thinks he's a concert pianist." Word about the video spread quickly through the school's wealthy social circle. Parents of students heard about it. Board members were told the story. Soon, everyone in the conservatory's upper-class community knew about the janitor who had dared to play the concert grand. The story took on a life of its own as it was retold. Details were added and changed. Some people said Marcus had played for hours. Others said he had damaged the piano. A few claimed he had been drunk. The truth became less important than the entertainment value of the story. Students began to hear whispers about the video. They were told that their parents and the faculty were laughing about the janitor, who thought he could play classical music. The students, eager to fit in with the adults around them, began to find the story funny too. Marcus noticed that people were looking at him differently, but he did not understand why. Students who had never paid attention to him before were now pointing and whispering when he walked by. Faculty members who usually ignored him completely now watched him with strange expressions. Marcus thought maybe he had made a mistake in his cleaning routine. He checked his work more carefully and made sure his uniform was neat and clean. But the strange looks continued. Something had changed, but he could not figure out what. On Friday afternoon, Marcus was cleaning near the main office when he heard laughter coming from Dr. Hartwell's room. Through the partially open door, he could see several faculty members gathered around a computer screen. They were watching something and making comments. "Look at how seriously he takes himself," one teacher said, laughing. "The poor man probably thinks he's the next Mozart," said another. Marcus could not see what they were watching, but something about their tone made him uncomfortable. He had heard that kind of laughter before. It was not the kind that came from joy or happiness. It was the kind that came from feeling superior to someone else. Marcus finished his work and moved on to another part of the building. But the laughter followed him in his mind. He had the feeling that he was missing something important, something that everyone else knew but him. That weekend, Marcus could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He noticed more stares and whispers when he came to work on Monday. Students who had never spoken to him before were now looking at him with smirks on their faces. Marcus did not know that he had become the subject of cruel jokes throughout the conservatory. He did not know that his most private moment had been turned into entertainment for people who thought they were better than him. He did not know that his beautiful music had been twisted into something to laugh at. All he knew was that something had changed and he was afraid to find out what it was. Tuesday morning started like any other day for Marcus. He arrived at work early and began his cleaning routine. But as he was mopping the main hallway, he heard his name being called over the intercom system. "Marcus Williams, please report to the director's office immediately." Marcus had never been called to Dr. Hartwell's office before. In 3 years of working at the conservatory, he had barely spoken to her. She was the kind of person who lived in a different world from people like him. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with worry as he put away his mop and headed upstairs. The director's office was on the 3rd floor in a part of the building Marcus rarely visited. The hallways here were fancier, with thick carpets and expensive paintings on the walls. Everything was designed to impress important visitors and remind people of the school's prestige. Marcus knocked on the heavy wooden door and heard Dr. Hartwell's voice telling him to come in. He entered the office and immediately felt out of place. The room was huge with tall windows and antique furniture. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Dr. Hartwell's desk was made of dark wood and looked like it belonged in a palace. Dr. Hartwell sat behind her desk wearing a black suit and pearl necklace. Her gray hair was pulled back severely and her lips were pressed into a thin line. She did not ask Marcus to sit down. She did not offer him coffee or water. She just stared at him with cold, disapproving eyes. "Mr. Williams," she began, her voice sharp and formal, "I need to discuss a serious matter with you." Marcus stood in front of her desk like a student called to the principal's office. He tried to think of what he might have done wrong. Had he broken something while cleaning? Had he missed an important area? He could not imagine why the director would want to see him. Dr. Hartwell turned her computer screen around so Marcus could see it. On the screen was a frozen image from a security camera. It showed Marcus sitting at the concert grand piano with his hands on the keys. Marcus felt his heart stop. His legs suddenly felt weak and he had to fight to stay standing. He had been caught. His secret moment of joy and music had been recorded for everyone to see. "Can you explain this?" Dr. Hartwell asked, her voice dripping with disapproval. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. He stared at the image on the screen and felt his face burning with shame and embarrassment. He had known he was breaking the rules, but in that moment, the music had mattered more than anything else. I was just," Marcus started, but he could not finish the sentence. "You were just what?" Dr. Hartwell demanded. "Taking liberties with expensive equipment that doesn't belong to you? Forgetting your place in this institution?" The way she said "your place" made Marcus flinch. There was so much coldness in those words, so much judgment. Dr. Hartwell was not just angry about the piano. She was angry that someone like Marcus had dared to touch something meant for people like her. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I know I shouldn't have played the piano. It won't happen again." "You're absolutely right, it won't happen again," Dr. Hartwell said, standing up from her chair. "Mr. Williams, do you have any idea how much that piano is worth? It's a custom-built concert grand that cost more than you'll make in 10 years. It's not a toy for you to play with." Marcus nodded, feeling smaller with each word she spoke. He wanted to explain about his background, about why he knew how to play. But Dr. Hartwell did not seem interested in explanations. "Furthermore," she continued, walking around her desk to stand closer to him, "your little performance has become quite the source of amusement for our faculty and donors. Everyone is talking about the janitor who thinks he's a concert pianist." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. His beautiful moment with the music had been turned into a joke. People were laughing at him. The thing that had brought him so much joy was now a source of embarrassment. "I didn't mean for anyone to see," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Well, they did see," Dr. Hartwell snapped. "And now I have to deal with the aftermath. Some of our donors are questioning our security protocols. They're worried about what other liberties the staff might be taking." Marcus tried to explain himself. "Dr. Hartwell, I used to study music. I went to Juilliard for 2 years before I had to leave because of family problems. I know how to play piano properly. I would never damage the instrument." Dr. Hartwell looked at him with skepticism and barely concealed disgust. "Juilliard? You expect me to believe that someone with a Juilliard education is working as a janitor? Mr. Williams, anyone can bang on piano keys and make noise. It takes breeding, proper education, and years of refined training to make real music." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Breeding, proper education, refined training. Dr. Hartwell was not just dismissing his talent. She was dismissing him as a person. In her mind, someone like Marcus could never be a real musician, no matter how well he played. "I can prove it," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "I can show you my old school records. I can play anything you want me to play. I know this music better than most of your students." Dr. Hartwell laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Mr. Williams, you seem to be confused about your role here. You are not a student. You are not a teacher. You are not a musician. You are an employee whose job is to clean this building and maintain its appearance. Nothing more." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. For 25 years, he had accepted his place in life. He had been quiet and invisible and grateful for whatever scraps he was given. But something about Dr. Hartwell's attitude awakened a pride in him that had been sleeping for too long. "I may be a janitor now," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But I am also a musician. That doesn't change just because I clean floors for a living." Dr. Hartwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Mr. Williams, I think you need to remember who you're talking to. I am the director of this institution. You are a custodial employee who can be replaced at any time. I suggest you adjust your attitude accordingly." The threat was clear. Marcus could lose his job. He needed this job to pay his rent and buy food. He needed the health insurance it provided. He could not afford to make enemies of powerful people like Dr. Hartwell. But as Marcus looked at her cold, superior expression, he realized something important. He was tired of being treated like he was worth nothing. He was tired of being invisible. He was tired of pretending that music did not matter to him. "What exactly are you telling me?" Marcus asked. "I'm telling you that if you ever touch one of our instruments again, you will be terminated immediately," Dr. Hartwell said. "I'm telling you to remember your place and stick to your job duties. And I'm telling you that this incident has been noted in your employment file." Marcus stood silently for a moment, processing everything that had happened. His moment of joy had been turned into humiliation. His talent had been dismissed as worthless noise. His dignity had been stripped away by someone who thought his money and status made him better than everyone else. But something had changed inside Marcus during this conversation. The music that had awakened in him a few nights ago was still there, and it was not going back to sleep. Dr. Hartwell could threaten his job and mock his background, but she could not take away his talent or his love for music. "Is there anything else?" Marcus asked quietly. "Just remember what I've told you," Dr. Hartwell said, sitting back down at her desk. "You're dismissed." Marcus turned and walked toward the door. As he reached for the handle, Dr. Hartwell spoke again. "Oh, and Mr. Williams? I suggest you focus on finding better ways to entertain yourself in your free time. Perhaps something more appropriate for someone in your position." Marcus paused with his hand on the door handle. For a moment, he considered turning around and telling Dr. Hartwell exactly what he thought of her and her attitude. He wanted to explain that music belonged to everyone, not just the wealthy and privileged. He wanted to show her that talent and heart mattered more than money and social status. Instead, Marcus opened the door and walked out. But as he made his way back to his cleaning cart, he was not the same man who had walked into that office. Something had been awakened in him that could not be put back to sleep. Dr. Hartwell thought she had put Marcus in his place. She thought she had reminded him of the natural order of things. But what she had actually done was ignite a fire in someone who had forgotten how bright he could shine. Marcus spent the rest of that day thinking about what had happened. He thought about the way Dr. Hartwell had looked at him, like he was something dirty that needed to be cleaned up. He thought about how his music had been turned into a joke for rich people to laugh at. But mostly he thought about how it had felt to play piano again, how alive and whole and real he had felt with his hands on those keys, how the music had flowed through him like it was coming home after a long journey. That night, as Marcus finished his work and prepared to leave the building, he made a decision. Dr. Hartwell could threaten his job and mock his dreams, but she could not take away who he really was. She could not silence the music inside him. Marcus did not know about the conservatory's upcoming gala, or the open mic tradition that might give him a chance to prove himself. He did not know that his moment of revenge and redemption was closer than he thought. 3 weeks after his confrontation with Dr. Hartwell, Marcus noticed unusual activity around the conservatory. Students were practicing more hours than usual. Faculty members were having excited conversations in the hallways. Flowers were being delivered and decorations were being hung in the main concert hall. Marcus learned from listening to conversations that the annual gala was coming up. It was the biggest event of the year at the conservatory. Wealthy donors, famous musicians, and important people from the city would attend. Students would perform to showcase their talents and hopefully impress the audience. The gala was also a fundraising event. Tickets cost hundreds of dollars each, and the money helped pay for scholarships and new equipment. For many students, performing at the gala was a chance to be discovered by people who could help their careers. Marcus had worked at the conservatory during 2 previous galas, but he had always been invisible during these events. He would clean the building beforehand and then stay out of sight while the festivities happened. The gala was for important people, not for janitors, but this year felt different. Marcus found himself paying more attention to the preparations. He listened as students discussed their performance pieces. He watched them practice with nervous excitement. He saw how much the gala meant to them and their futures. On a Wednesday afternoon, Marcus was cleaning near the main office when he overheard Margaret, Dr. Hartwell's assistant, talking on the phone about the gala program. "Yes, we'll have the usual student performances," Margaret was saying. "And then there's the open mic portion at the end of the evening. It's a tradition that allows anyone to perform if they sign up." Marcus stopped what he was doing and listened more carefully. An open mic portion where anyone could perform? He had never heard about this before. Margaret continued her conversation. Oh yes, it's been part of the gala for years. Dr. Hartwell likes it because it shows how inclusive and welcoming the conservatory is. Though honestly, it's usually just more students who didn't get selected for the main program. After Margaret finished her phone call, Marcus approached her desk. Margaret was a kind woman in her 50s who had always been polite to Marcus. She looked up from her paperwork with a friendly smile. Hello, Marcus. How can I help you? I couldn't help but overhear you mention an open mic at the gala, Marcus said carefully. Could you tell me more about that? Margaret's expression showed surprise. The open mic? Well, it's a tradition we've had for about 10 years. Anyone can sign up to perform during the last hour of the evening. It's meant to celebrate the community spirit of the conservatory. Anyone can sign up? Marcus asked. Even staff members? Margaret paused, clearly not expecting this question. Well, technically, yes. The rules just say anyone. But Marcus, you should know that it's usually just students who participate. I'm not sure Dr. Hartwell would be comfortable with, but the rules say anyone, Marcus pressed gently. Margaret nodded slowly. Yes, they do. If you're serious about this, you would need to sign up by Friday. There's a form you have to fill out with your name and what you plan to perform. Marcus felt his heart beating faster. This could be his chance. His opportunity to show everyone what real music sounded like. His moment to prove that talent had nothing to do with money or social status. Where do I get the form? Marcus asked. Margaret looked uncertain. Marcus, are you sure about this? The gala is a very formal event. There will be hundreds of important people there. If Dr. Hartwell finds out you're planning to perform, she can't stop me if it's allowed by the rules, can she? Marcus asked. Margaret thought for a moment. No, I suppose she can't. The open mic is part of the official program. Once someone signs up, their name goes on the list that gets printed in the program. Margaret opened her desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Here's the form. You need to fill it out completely and return it to me by 5 o'clock on Friday. Marcus took the form with hands that were slightly shaking. At the top, it said, Meridian Conservatory Annual Gala, Open Mic Sign-Up Form. Below that were lines for name, contact information, and a description of the planned performance. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. As Marcus walked away from Margaret's desk, he could feel her watching him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. He knew she was probably worried about what Dr. Hartwell would do when she found out. But Marcus was past the point of worrying about Dr. Hartwell's approval. That evening, Marcus sat at his small kitchen table in his apartment with the form in front of him. He stared at the blank lines and thought about what he was considering doing. Performing at the gala would mean exposing himself to hundreds of people who might laugh at him or dismiss him. It would mean taking a huge risk with his job and his reputation, but it would also mean having the chance to show his truth, to prove that music lived inside him just as powerfully as it lived inside any of the wealthy students, to demonstrate that talent could not be bought or inherited. Marcus picked up a pen and began to fill out the form. On the line for name, he wrote Marcus Williams. On the line for performance description, he wrote Piano Solo Chopin Ballade, No. 1 in G minor. He chose Chopin because it was a piece he knew by heart, a piece that had always moved him deeply and allowed him to express the full range of his emotions. If he was going to take this risk, he wanted to perform something that truly represented who he was as a musician. Marcus sealed the completed form in an envelope and kept it with him for the next 2 days. Several times he almost threw it away. The smart thing would be to forget this crazy idea and stay invisible. The safe thing would be to keep his head down and his mouth shut. But every time Marcus walked past the concert hall and saw the piano, he remembered how it felt to play again. He remembered the joy and the sense of coming home to himself. He remembered that for 30 minutes he had been alive in a way he had not felt in 25 years. On Friday afternoon, Marcus delivered the form to Margaret's desk. She accepted it with a worried expression, but did not try to talk him out of it. Marcus, she said quietly, I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Marcus replied. Margaret added his form to a small stack of others. The gala is next Saturday evening. Performers should arrive by 6:30 for the sound check. The open mic starts at 9 o'clock. As Marcus walked away, he felt a strange combination of excitement and terror. He had committed himself to something that could change his life forever. In 1 week, he would either prove himself as a musician or humiliate himself in front of the most important people in the city's arts community. Word about Marcus's sign-up spread quickly through the conservatory's gossip network. Students whispered about it in the hallways. Faculty members shared the news with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Someone told Dr. Hartwell about it within hours. Dr. Hartwell called Margaret into her office immediately. "Is it true that the janitor signed up for the open mic?" Margaret nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Dr. Hartwell. His form was properly filled out and submitted on time. According to our rules, I had to accept it." Dr. Hartwell's face turned red with anger. "This is ridiculous. We can't have the hired help performing at our most important fundraising event." "What will the donors think?" "I'm sorry, but his registration is legitimate," Margaret said. "The open mic rules clearly state that anyone can participate. We've never restricted it before." Dr. Hartwell paced behind her desk like a caged animal. "Fine. If he wants to embarrass himself in front of 500 people, let him. It will be amusing to watch him fail publicly. Maybe that will finally teach him his place." But privately, Dr. Hartwell was more worried than she let on. She remembered the video of Marcus playing, and despite her dismissive words, she knew he had genuine talent. What if he actually played well? What if he impressed the audience? What if people started asking questions about why someone with such ability was working as a janitor? Dr. Hartwell decided to take precautions. She called several board members and major donors to give them advance warning about what to expect. "We're going to have a little entertainment at the gala," she told them with false cheerfulness. "Our janitor has decided to perform. It should be quite amusing. I'm sure you'll all enjoy the novelty of it." The way she spoke about Marcus made it clear that the audience should not take his performance seriously. She was setting him up to be seen as a curiosity, a joke, something to laugh at rather than respect. Meanwhile, Marcus spent every free moment practicing. He could not use the conservatory's pianos, so he went to a music store that had practice rooms for rent. He paid $20 an hour to use an old upright piano in a tiny room with thin walls. Marcus worked on the Chopin piece until his fingers ached. He practiced the difficult passages over and over. He worked on his dynamics and his expression. He wanted every note to be perfect. He wanted his performance to be undeniable. As the week progressed, Marcus noticed more stares and whispers than usual. Students pointed at him when they thought he was not looking. Faculty members watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to condescension. Everyone seemed to know about his planned performance. Some people seemed genuinely interested in hearing him play. Professor Morrison, the head of the piano department. The conservatory looked like a palace on the night of the gala. Red carpets covered the entrance steps. Elegant flower arrangements decorated every corner. Soft lighting made everything glow with warmth and sophistication. Expensive cars dropped off guests in evening gowns and tuxedos. Marcus arrived through the back entrance as instructed. He wore his best suit and carried sheet music in a simple folder. His hands were sweating despite the cool evening air. Through the windows, he could see the main hall filling with important people. City council members, business leaders, famous musicians, and wealthy donors all gathered for the conservatory's biggest night of the year. Marcus made his way to the small room behind the stage where performers were supposed to wait. A few students were there, looking nervous and excited in their formal clothes. They glanced at Marcus with curiosity and whispered among themselves. They knew who he was and why he was there. A young woman with a clipboard approached Marcus. She was a student volunteer helping to organize the performances. "Are you Marcus Williams?" she asked politely. "Yes, that's me," Marcus replied. "You're scheduled to perform during the open mic portion at 9:15, she said, checking her list. "There will be a brief sound check in a few minutes." Marcus nodded and found a quiet corner to sit in. He could hear the sounds of the gala through the walls. Orchestra music, laughter, and conversation blended together in a symphony of social success. This was a world he had never been part of, despite his years of working in the building. The sound check went smoothly. Marcus tested the microphone and played a few scales on the concert grand piano. The instrument was perfectly tuned and responsive to every touch. It was the same piano he had played secretly that night weeks ago, but now everything was different. Now he was here officially, legitimately as a performer. By 9 o'clock, the main performances had ended, and dinner was being served in the adjacent ballroom. The open mic portion would begin after dessert was finished. Marcus waited nervously as the scheduled time approached. At 9:10, guests began returning to the main hall for the final portion of the evening. Marcus watched through a crack in the curtain as hundreds of people took their seats. He saw Dr. Hartwell sitting in the front row, her face showing barely concealed irritation. She had dressed in her finest black gown and diamond jewelry, as if preparing for battle. Around Dr. Hartwell sat the conservatory's board members and major donors. These were the people who decided the school's future and funded its operations. They were used to being entertained by talented young students who might someday become famous musicians. They were not expecting to be challenged by a middle-aged janitor. The first few open mic performers went well. A violin student played a Mozart sonata. A young soprano sang an aria from Puccini. A piano student performed a Debussy prelude. The audience applauded politely after each performance, but Marcus could sense their restlessness. They were ready for the evening to end. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the master of ceremonies, "our final performer this evening is Marcus Williams, who will be playing Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor." A ripple of laughter went through the audience. Marcus heard someone whisper, "Oh, this should be good." Another voice said, "I can't wait to see this." The laughter was not mean-spirited exactly, but it was condescending. The audience thought they were about to witness an amusing spectacle. Dr. Hartwell sat forward in her seat with a satisfied expression. She had prepared the audience to expect entertainment rather than art. She had made sure everyone knew that what they were about to see was a novelty act, not a serious musical performance. Marcus walked onto the stage and the laughter became more pronounced. Some people were literally pointing at him and smiling. He looked out of place in his simple suit among all the designer gowns and expensive tuxedos. He was clearly not one of them, and the audience was enjoying the contrast. Marcus approached the piano bench slowly, trying to ignore the sounds from the audience. His heart was beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking slightly, and he hoped it would not affect his playing. This was his moment. Everything he had worked for, everything he had lost and found again came down to the next few minutes. He sat down at the bench and adjusted his position carefully. The stage lights were bright and warm on his face. The audience fell into a hush of anticipation mixed with amusement. They were waiting to be entertained by his failure. Marcus placed his hands on the keys and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his mother, who had always believed in his talent. He thought about the young man he had been at Juilliard, full of dreams and passion for music. He thought about all the years of silence and invisibility that had led to this moment. When Marcus began to play, something magical happened. The opening notes of the Chopin ballad floated through the concert hall with such beauty and precision that the scattered laughter immediately stopped. The melody was haunting and perfect, played with a technique that surprised everyone in the room. But technique was only the beginning. As Marcus continued playing, it became clear that something much deeper was happening. This was not just someone playing notes on a page. This was a human being pouring his entire life experience into music. Every note carried emotion that had been building up for 25 years. The Chopin ballad is one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. It requires not only technical skill, but also deep musical understanding and emotional maturity. Marcus played it like a man who had lived through every emotion the composer had written into the music. Joy, sorrow, hope, despair, love, loss. It was all there in his playing. The audience sat in stunned silence. Dr. Hartwell's satisfied expression had disappeared, replaced by shock and something that might have been fear. She had expected embarrassment and instead was witnessing artistry at its highest level. Marcus was lost in the music now, completely transported to another world. His body moved with the phrases. His face showed the emotions he was expressing through sound. He played with a freedom and authenticity that most of the students in the conservatory had never achieved. This was what music was supposed to be. Not just perfect technique, but truth transformed into sound. The difficult middle section of the piece presented no problems for Marcus. His fingers flew over the keys with confidence and precision. But more importantly, every note made musical sense. Every phrase was shaped with understanding and intention. This was the playing of someone who had lived with this music for decades, not someone who had learned it recently to show off. As Marcus moved toward the climactic section of the piece, the audience began to lean forward in their seats. They could sense something extraordinary happening. This was not the amateur performance they had expected to laugh at. This was professional-level playing that would have been impressive on any concert stage in the world. The climax of the ballade arrived with thunderous power. Marcus played with such intensity and passion that some people in the audience gasped audibly. The music filled every corner of the hall, demanding attention and respect. There was nothing funny or amateur about what they were hearing. This was music at its most powerful and moving. As the piece moved toward its conclusion, Marcus began to soften his playing. The ending of the Chopin ballade is gentle and reflective, like a man looking back on his life with both sadness and acceptance. Marcus played these final passages with such tenderness that several people in the audience felt tears coming to their eyes. The last note faded into silence and the hall remained completely quiet. For what felt like an eternity, nobody moved or spoke. The audience sat frozen, trying to process what they had just experienced. They had come expecting to be amused by a janitor's attempt at classical music. Instead, they had witnessed one of the most profound musical performances many of them had ever heard. Marcus sat at the piano bench with his hands in his lap, breathing heavily from the emotional intensity of his performance. He looked out at the audience and saw hundreds of faces staring back at him in amazement. These were the same people who had been laughing at him just minutes before. Then slowly one person began to clap. It was Professor Morrison, the head of the piano department. His applause was slow and deliberate, the kind reserved for truly exceptional performances. Other faculty members joined in, then students, then donors and board members. Within seconds, the entire audience was on its feet, giving Marcus a standing ovation. The applause was thunderous and sustained, growing louder rather than fading away. People were not just clapping politely. They were celebrating something extraordinary they had just witnessed. Marcus stood up from the piano bench and bowed slightly. He could see tears in some people's eyes. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. Dr. Hartwell sat motionless in the front row, her face pale with shock. The world she thought she understood had just been turned upside down. The applause continued for several minutes. Marcus bowed again and walked off the stage, but the audience kept clapping. Some people were shouting, "Bravo!" Others were wiping away tears. The evening that was supposed to end with polite applause for student performances had instead concluded with one of the most memorable musical moments in the conservatory's history. Marcus woke up the next morning to his phone ringing constantly. By the time he got out of bed, he had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. Word about his performance had spread far beyond the conservatory. Someone had recorded his performance on their phone and shared it online. The video was going viral. The local newspaper wanted to interview him. 3 different television stations had called asking for his story. A talent agent from Los Angeles had left a voicemail offering to represent him. Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. The video of his performance had been viewed over 50,000 times in just 12 hours. Comments poured in from people around the world who were moved by his playing and his story. "This gave me chills," wrote one person. "Proof that talent exists everywhere," wrote another. "Music has no boundaries," said a third. Marcus got dressed and took the bus to work as usual. He was not sure what to expect when he arrived at the conservatory. Would Dr. Hartwell fire him for embarrassing her? Would the other employees treat him differently? Would the students still ignore him like they always had? When Marcus entered the building through the back door, everything seemed normal at first. He got his cleaning cart and began his morning routine. But as he worked, he noticed people looking at him with new expressions. Students who had never acknowledged his existence before were now smiling and saying hello. "That was amazing last night," said Sarah, a violin student who had always walked past him without a word. "I've never heard anyone play with so much emotion." Marcus thanked her quietly and continued with his work. But throughout the morning, more people approached him. Faculty members who had ignored him for 3 years suddenly wanted to have conversations. Even some of the wealthy donors who had attended the gala stopped by to congratulate him. Dr. Hartwell stayed in her office all morning with the door closed. Margaret told Marcus that the director had been on the phone since early morning, dealing with calls from reporters and music industry professionals who wanted to know more about the conservatory's talented janitor. Around noon, Marcus was called to Dr. Hartwell's office again. This time the atmosphere was very different from their last meeting. Dr. Hartwell looked tired and stressed. Her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by uncertainty and barely controlled frustration. "Mr. Williams," she began, her voice careful and measured, "it seems your performance last night has attracted quite a bit of attention." Marcus nodded, but said nothing. He could see newspaper clippings on her desk and guessed that the story had made the morning news. "The conservatory has received numerous calls today. Dr. Hartwell continued. Reporters, music critics, even some concert venues are asking about you. This has put the institution in a rather unusual position. Marcus understood what she was really saying. The conservatory prided itself on discovering and developing talent. Now they had to explain how someone with Marcus's ability had been working as a janitor for 3 years without anyone noticing his gifts. Several board members have expressed concern, Dr. Hartwell said, choosing her words carefully, about how this situation reflects on our commitment to recognizing talent regardless of background. Marcus almost smiled at the irony. The same people who had laughed at him the night before were now worried about their reputation for inclusivity and fairness. Dr. Hartwell, Marcus said quietly, I want you to know that I have no intention of making trouble for the conservatory. I'm grateful for my job here, and I understand my position. Dr. Hartwell looked surprised by his response. She had probably expected him to be angry or demanding after his triumph the night before. However, Marcus continued, I also want you to know that I won't be hiding my musical abilities anymore. What happened last night reminded me of who I really am. Dr. Hartwell studied his face carefully. She could see that something fundamental had changed in Marcus. The quiet, invisible janitor was gone. In his place was a man who had rediscovered his dignity and his voice. Professor Morrison has made a suggestion, Dr. Hartwell said reluctantly, that the conservatory might consider offering you some kind of teaching position. Perhaps working with students who need help with musical expression and emotional connection to their playing. Marcus was stunned. A teaching position at the conservatory would be a dream come true. It would mean working with music every day instead of just cleaning around it. Of course, Dr. Hartwell added quickly. This would have to be approved by the board, and there would be many details to work out. Your lack of a completed degree could be problematic. Marcus nodded. I understand. But Dr. Hartwell, I want to be clear about something. If I were to teach here, it would be as a musician and educator, not as someone grateful for charity. I have something valuable to offer these students. Dr. Hartwell's lips pressed into a thin line. Even now, she found it difficult to accept that the janitor was speaking to her as an equal. But she could not deny the evidence of his talent that the entire city was talking about. We'll see what can be arranged, she said curtly. Over the following weeks, Marcus's life changed in ways he had never imagined. The video of his performance continued to spread across social media. Music lovers around the world shared his story and praised his playing. Several major news outlets featured him in human interest stories about hidden talent and second chances. A music critic from the city's most prestigious newspaper wrote a review that Marcus read over and over again. In 30 years of attending classical performances, I have rarely witnessed such a perfect combination of technical mastery and emotional authenticity. Mr. Williams's performance reminded everyone in attendance why we fell in love with music in the first place. Record companies began reaching out with offers to produce an album. Concert halls invited him to perform. Music schools offered him teaching positions. The opportunities that had seemed impossible just weeks before were suddenly within reach. But the most important change was happening inside the conservatory itself. Students who had previously shown only technical skill began asking Marcus about how to bring more feeling to their playing. He found himself giving informal advice during his work breaks, helping young musicians understand that music was about communication, not just correct notes. Professor Morrison formally proposed that Marcus be hired as an artist in residence, a position that would allow him to teach master classes and work with students on musical interpretation. The board, feeling pressure from the positive publicity Marcus had brought to the school, approved the position. Marcus kept his janitorial job while beginning his teaching duties. He said he wanted to stay connected to the work that had supported him during his difficult years. But everyone understood that he was also making a statement about dignity and the value of all honest work. Dr. Hartwell struggled to adjust to the new reality. She had built her career on maintaining clear social hierarchies and boundaries. Marcus's transformation challenged everything she believed about who belonged in elite institutions. She remained polite but distant, never quite accepting that she had been wrong about him. 6 months after the gala, Marcus gave his first official solo concert at the conservatory. The event sold out within hours, with tickets going for premium prices. The audience included many of the same people who had laughed at him that night in October. But now they came with respect and anticipation. Marcus chose to open the concert with the same Chopin ballade he had played at the gala. As he sat at the piano bench, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. 25 years of silence, pain, and invisible work had led to this second chance at his dreams. The performance was even better than his gala debut. Playing regularly had restored his technique to its peak, but more importantly, his experiences had given him an emotional depth that enriched every note. The audience was completely absorbed from the first measure to the last. After the concert, Marcus was surrounded by admirers, students, and fellow musicians. Among them was Trevor Ashford, the arrogant student whose dropped sheet music had led to Marcus's rediscovery of the piano. "Mr. Williams," Trevor said, his earlier cockiness replaced by genuine humility, "I owe you an apology. I've been taking lessons from Professor Morrison, and he's been using recordings of your playing to teach me about musical expression. I'm embarrassed by how I used to act." Marcus shook the young man's hand warmly. "Music has a way of teaching us all humility, Trevor. Keep working on finding your authentic voice." As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself alone on the stage where his transformation had begun. He sat at the piano and played softly, not for any audience but for himself. The notes filled the empty hall with quiet beauty. Margaret appeared in the doorway, carrying a folder of fan mail that had arrived for Marcus. "The morning mail brought another stack," she said with a smile, "including a letter from Juilliard. They want to award you an honorary doctorate." Marcus thanked her and continued playing. Through the windows, he could see the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there were people who felt invisible, people who had given up on their dreams, people who believed their talents were not valuable because of their circumstances. Marcus hoped his story would reach them,